You ever move somewhere thinking, alright, this is it. This is peace. This is where I drink my coffee in silence and finally learn how to meditate or whatever? Yeah, that was me. I just bought this house in a quiet cul-de-sac where every lawn looked like it was hand-trimmed by monks. Birds were chirping. The mailman smiled at me like we were old friends. It was almost too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you think someone's watching you through their blinds. Which they were. I later found out her name was Karen. But in that first week? Oh, I was naive. I was baking banana bread, setting up my hammock, making mental Pinterest boards. I even waved at my neighbor across the street. He just stared back like I'd farted in his mailbox. Whatever, I was happy. And that, my friends, was the moment I declared war. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I took the flamingo down, brought it into the garage, and spent the next 2 hours Googling how to join the HOA board just to burn it from the inside. But instead of going full vigilante, yet I made a tactical decision. I went to the garden store, bought one lawn gnome, just a little guy, red hat, smiling, holding a tiny rake. I placed him by the mailbox. His expression said, "Come at me." And that, my friends, was the moment I declared war. It took exactly 24 hours. 24 hours for the gnome to get noticed. I'd named him Greg, by the way. Greg the gnome. He stood there with his little rake, proud, defiant, a beacon of rebellion in a world of beige conformity. Next morning, I wake up to the sound of a doorbell. Not a knock, the bell, which in suburbia is basically the equivalent of someone kicking in your front door. I open it, and there she is. Karen. She's standing with a clipboard, a manila folder, and the kind of sunglasses that scream, "I call the cops on kids selling lemonade." Behind her, a tiny dog yaps from inside her designer tote bag. It looked like a rat in a Gucci sleeping bag. "Hi there," she says, smiling the fakest smile I've ever seen outside of a timeshare presentation. "I'm Karen, president of the HOA. I just wanted to welcome you personally and talk about Greg." I blink. "You mean the gnome?" Her smile tightens. "Yes, Greg. He's problematic." Now, mind you, Greg is just standing there. He's not flipping the bird. He's not mooning anyone. He's literally holding a rake like he's offering to help clean the sidewalk. But Karen looks at him like he just keyed her Lexus. "You see," she continues, "HOA guidelines state that lawn decor must maintain neighborhood aesthetic harmony, and Greg is a bit too whimsical." "Too whimsical?" I repeat. She nods, deadly serious. Whimsy invites chaos. First it's a gnome, then it's flamingos, then someone paints their mailbox purple. Next thing you know, we've got drum circles and people parking RVs on their lawns. I stare at her, trying to process if she's joking. She is not. "Karen," I say calmly, "he's a gnome." He literally stands still and smiles. She pulls a paper from her folder. It's a printed photo of Greg, in black and white, like a mugshot. "We've received complaints," she says. 2 anonymous tips, one from a concerned neighbor and one from myself. I'm about to laugh, but she's already circling items on the paper. "Here's the issue," she continues. "Greg is wearing a red hat. That draws too much visual attention. He's also holding a rake, a tool, which may imply work is being done, and that's misleading. You see, we don't allow tool-related lawn art. Tool-related. Lawn. Article." At this point, I genuinely think I'm on a hidden camera show. I start looking around for a guy with a boom mic. But no, Karen is 100% serious. "I'm going to need you to remove Greg within 48 hours, she says, "or you'll be issued a formal notice of violation and fines, starting at $50 a day. Then she hands me a pamphlet titled Understanding Harmony in Shared Spaces and walks away like she just ended world hunger. I look down at Greg. He looks back, still smiling. I swear I saw him wink, and that's when I knew this was no longer just about lawn decor. This was war. I don't like threats. I especially don't like threats that come wrapped in laminated pamphlets with phrases like aesthetic harmony and tool implying decor. So naturally, I did what any calm, rational adult would do when faced with tyranny in the form of suburban lawn fascism. I declared escalation. First, I did some research. Turns out there's no federal law against owning more than one lawn gnome. I checked. Twice. Then I went online. And by online, I mean I deep dived into the weird underworld of decorative lawn ornaments. Did you know there are entire websites dedicated to gnome enthusiasts? Forums, fan pages. There's even a guy in Ohio who claims his gnome has healing energy. I didn't need healing. I needed numbers. And so the next day, I placed an order. Not for one gnome, not even 5. I ordered 37. 37 unique, highly detailed, utterly ridiculous gnomes. Gnome chef, Gnome pirate, gnome in a hot tub, gnome doing yoga, gnome riding a flamingo. Full circle. I tracked the package like it was a missile delivery. When it arrived, I was outside before the UPS guy even turned off the engine. By sundown, the front yard was transformed. Greg now stood proudly at the head of a carefully staged gnome battalion. They were positioned like chess pieces, facing the street, silently defiant. I gave them names, all of them. Harold, Bernice, Captain Gnomebeard. There was a tiny picnic scene on the left and a Viking gnome siege tower on the right. It was a statement. People slowed down when driving past. Some stopped. One lady walked her dog across my lawn just to take a selfie with a gnome wearing sunglasses and holding a margarita. The next morning, I brewed my coffee and stood on the porch watching the HOA's fragile sense of order crack like cheap vinyl siding. And then, as if on cue, she came. Karen. This time, no clipboard, no pamphlet, just unfiltered fury. Her sunglasses were off, her eyes locked on mine like I'd spray-painted profanity on her Lexus. "I thought we had an understanding," she hissed. I sipped my coffee. "We did. You said remove the gnome. I did not. Instead, I gave him friends. He was lonely." "There are 37, she snapped. "Technically 38, including Greg," I corrected. "And soon to be 39. I have a disco gnome coming Tuesday." Karen's face twitched. "This is deliberate provocation." I leaned in. "Exactly." She looked like she was going to explode into HOA confetti. "You're going to regret this?" I smiled. "So will you. Greg's unionizing." She stormed off, muttering something about bylaws and psychological warfare. The neighbors, by the way, they loved it. 3 new families came by that weekend to admire the gnome exhibit. One even brought cookies. The message was clear. This yard doesn't belong to HOA regulations anymore. This yard belongs to the gnome front. I should have known Karen wouldn't take the gnome front lying down. No, she wasn't the type to let a whimsical uprising go unanswered. She was the type to read bylaws the way some people read horoscopes, obsessively and with dangerous amounts of confidence, so I wasn't exactly surprised when I came home from work and found a large neon orange notice duct taped across my garage like it was a crime scene. Immediate notice of violation. Underneath it, 3 pages stapled together with aggressive legal formatting and more bolded words than a middle school essay. Apparently, the HOA board had held an emergency vote and passed what they called a temporary lawn ornament moratorium. A moratorium, y'all. Like I'm running a radioactive gnome lab. The new rule stated that any yard, featuring more than 3 decorative figures, would now be considered in visual breach of community unity. Karen was quoted in the document. "This isn't about lawn ornaments," she'd said. "It's about preserving the psychological fabric of our neighborhood. Whimsy leads to chaos. Chaos leads to decline." I don't know where she studied sociology, but I'm guessing it was between yoga class and her 3rd Chardonnay. Now here's where it gets real. The notice said I had 72 hours to comply. If not, they'd start fining me $100 a day. And not just that, they threatened to place a lien on my house if I refused to pay. That's right, a lien, over gnomes. I called the HOA office, and of course, Karen herself answered. She said she was expecting my call, like she was some Bond villain with a garden hat. I tried to reason. You can't just pass emergency laws targeting one person. "Oh, we didn't name you," she said sweetly. "It's a general ordinance. It just happens that you're the only violator." "How convenient," she paused. "Consider this your final warning." Then she hung up. I looked out the window. Greg stood proudly among his ceramic comrades, unbothered, brave. But for the first time, I felt like the enemy was getting organized. Karen had declared legislative war, and I was no longer just a guy with a few gnomes. I was a revolutionary with a growing fine balance and zero intention of backing down. This wasn't just about ornaments anymore. This was principle. I figured I wasn't the only one who had beef with the HOA. I mean, statistically, not everyone in this neighborhood could be drinking Karen's Kool-Aid. There had to be others, quiet sufferers, hiding their wind chimes and garden frogs like contraband, living in fear of another pastel-colored citation letter. So I did what any respectable revolutionary would do. I made flyers. Not digital, not email. Real, physical, old-school rebellion flyers. Printed in black and white, hand-trimmed with scissors, and featuring a drawing of Greg in sunglasses with the caption, "Tired of HOA nonsense, you are not alone. Meet tonight, midnight, at the cul-de-sac." I didn't sign it, didn't have to. I waited until sunset, then went on my stealth mission, slipping them into mailboxes, taping them to lampposts, sliding them under welcome mats like I was delivering gnome-themed propaganda. And then I waited. At 11:58 p.m., I walked out into the cul-de-sac with a folding chair and a flashlight. I wasn't expecting much. Honestly, I thought maybe one neighbor would show up, realize I wasn't selling Girl Scout cookies, and back away slowly, but at 12:01, the shadows started moving. First it was Jim from 2 houses down, the guy who never mowed his lawn quite to regulation. Then Sarah, the yoga teacher with the wind chimes she'd been warned about. Then Mark and his wife Lisa, who once got fined for having a planter shaped like a boot. By 12:15, there were 10 of us. We sat in a loose circle like the world's weirdest HOA haters support group. Everyone shared their stories, the fines, the letters, the weird HOA surveillance golf cart that circled the block every Thursday like clockwork. Turns out, Karen wasn't just annoying. She was running the HOA like a suburban dictatorship. People had tried to fight back before, filing appeals, writing emails, even attending meetings. But it always ended the same way. Karen shutting them down with obscure clauses, endless red tape, and that smug, Botox-stretched smile. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the hour, maybe it was the coffee, or maybe it was the collective realization that we'd had enough of being bullied by a woman who once fined someone for having too many pumpkins during Halloween. We made a pact, a real one, with handshakes and whispered code names. Operation Liberty Lawn was born. Our goals were simple: undermine Karen's authority without technically violating HOA rules, expose the arbitrary and ridiculous nature of her regulations, eventually take control of the HOA board through democratic means, or mischief. Sarah volunteered to build a secret group chat. Mark said he had an old projector we could use for backyard presentations. I offered snacks. Jim, surprisingly, had access to a guy who printed custom doormats with messages like HOA not welcome. It was a start. The resistance had no uniforms, no funding, and no plan longer than 3 bullet points. But we had something more powerful. We had petty determination. And that is a dangerous thing. They say when you corner a wild animal, it gets dangerous. Apparently the same applies to HOA presidents named Karen, because just when the resistance started feeling the first warm breeze of momentum, Karen unleashed what can only be described as tactical bureaucratic hellfire. It began innocently enough. First, everyone in the resistance started getting random inspections, not just letters, no, surprise compliance audits. A guy named Daryl, whom I'm 99% sure Karen bribed with banana bread and a gas card, began showing up with a clipboard, walking into people's yards with a measuring tape and a laser level like we were applying for government zoning permits. Jim got cited for overly expressive holiday lights, even though it was March and his lights weren't even plugged in. Sarah was told her wind chimes violated noise tranquility standards. They were bamboo. They made less sound than a disappointed sigh. And me? I got hit with 7 violations in a single envelope. 7. Apparently, my trash bins were visible from the street at non-designated hours. The mailbox was tilted at a non-conforming angle. One gnome, Greg's cousin Felipe, was standing too close to a sprinkler head and may present a tripping hazard to imaginary pedestrians. Imaginary pedestrians. Oh, and the kicker? They claimed my grass was too aggressively green. That's not even a real sentence. That's just adjectives fighting. But it didn't stop there. One morning, I walked outside and noticed a new sign at the edge of my property. A small, shiny plaque planted in the grass. It read, "Pending HOA Landscape Evaluation Zone." What the hell is that? I called the number listed on the sign. Got a voicemail. The recorded message was just Karen saying, "Your call is very important to us. It will be ignored in the order it was received." She was escalating. Hard. Then came the real bomb. An anonymous tip reported my property for non-compliant wildlife. Non-compliant wildlife. I didn't even know what that meant until a man from Wild Suburbia Animal Control showed up, claiming I might be harboring raccoons with suspicious behavioral patterns. All I had were 2 squirrels who occasionally stared into my kitchen window, probably judging my snack choices. I knew exactly who was behind it. Karen had weaponized the system, not just the rules, the people, the bored, retired, clipboard-wielding army of suburban tattletales. She'd mobilized them like sleeper agents, triggered by non-neutral mailbox colors and rebellious garden accessories. But here's the thing about people like Karen. They always think fear wins. They think paperwork and threats will make you fold, that you'll just quietly retreat and start trimming your hedges into submission. But what Karen didn't realize, what she never counted on, was that for every rule she twisted, for every fine she filed, for every squirrel she tried to interrogate, she was only making us stronger. We didn't shrink, we didn't scatter, we doubled down. Because now, the battle wasn't just about gnomes or wind chimes or the deeply philosophical question of what counts as too festive. It was about freedom. And Karen? She had just declared war on the wrong cul-de-sac. The HOA meetings were always held in the same place, the beige rec center next to the community pool that always smelled like wet flip-flops and passive aggression. Karen made them feel like trials, not gatherings, no snacks, no smiles, just cold folding chairs, a whiteboard no one used, and a table where she sat like a tyrannical wedding planner who hated joy. But this time, we came prepared. Operation Liberty Lawn wasn't just about rebellion anymore, it was about presence, about showing up, and looking like we belonged. So we dressed the part. Polos, khakis, live, laugh, love energy. We didn't want to look like a resistance, we wanted to look like the neighborhood. Karen, of course, was already there when we walked in. Hair helmeted, clipboard clutched like a weapon. Her expression dropped 2 emotional octaves when she saw how many people filed in behind me. Mark, Sarah, Jim, Lisa, even Quiet Don, who hadn't left his house since the incident with the inflatable turkey in 2019. We took our seats without a word. Karen adjusted her mic. "This meeting is now in session," she said, voice stiff enough to crack drywall. "First order of business." I raised my hand. Her eyes narrowed. "Yes." "Greg's owner." I smiled. "Actually, I believe the community would like to revisit the recent emergency ordinance regarding lawn ornaments." A ripple of quiet support ran through the room. Karen blinked, visibly thrown off script. "That motion is closed," she said. "It was passed unanimously by the board." I stood up. That's funny because none of us remember voting for that. And as it turns out, the HOA bylaws require any emergency vote to be confirmed at the following public meeting. Silence. Dead, glorious silence. Karen's nostrils flared like a bull on a peloton. "That's a misinterpretation." Mark stood. "Actually, Section 6B, line 12. He's right." "Jim, page 8, I highlighted it." Even Lisa had a binder, with tabs. Karen looked around, and for the first time in HOA history, her expression cracked. Just a flicker, but I saw it. That perfect veneer of power. Bending. She tried to redirect. "Let's move on to mailbox uniformity." "Motion to overturn the emergency ornament moratorium," Sarah said loudly. "Seconded," I added. Karen slammed her clipboard down so hard it echoed. "You people have no respect for structure." And that's when Don, silent, mysterious Don, cleared his throat and said, "We have respect, just not for your structure." Game, set, Gnome. After the HOA meeting ambush, things got quiet. Too quiet. Karen stopped sending letters. The clipboard patrols thinned out. No new signage popped up on my lawn overnight. For a moment, we thought we'd won. That maybe, just maybe, she had accepted defeat with whatever grace is available to someone who color codes her pantry and drinks Chardonnay from a monogrammed tumbler. But evil doesn't retreat, it recalibrates. It was around Thursday when I noticed the guy. He wasn't from the neighborhood, that much was obvious. Wrong car, wrong clothes, wrong vibe. He parked at the end of the block in a beige sedan, so generic it practically screamed spy, and pretended to be interested in a for-sale flyer taped to a light pole. Then the next day, he showed up again. Same car, different hoodie. The day after that, I accidentally dropped a garbage bag a few feet from his bumper and caught a good look at him through the reflection in his rearview mirror. Mid-40s, aviator shades, earpiece. Karen had hired a private investigator. I didn't even know that was allowed. Like, how far off the HOA reservation do you have to go before you think, you know what this needs? Surveillance. Of course, I couldn't prove he was working for her. But later that week, Sarah's husband ran into him outside the rec center and struck up a fake friendly conversation. Guy claimed he was a real estate consultant. Then, when asked what agency, he said, Independent Acquisition Services. Which is not a thing. We Googled it. The only result was a listing for an abandoned VHS store in Tampa. And that's when we knew Karen had gone full deep state. The resistance gathered that night in Mark's garage, our unofficial war room. Folding chairs, snacks, printed HOA bylaws, and the growing sense that we were no longer dealing with a control freak. We were dealing with a suburban Bond villain. "She's trying to dig something up on us," Lisa said. "She's trying to make us snap," Sarah added, "so she can say we're a threat to the community." Jim nodded. "It's psychological warfare." I took a deep breath. Then we need to flip it. We devised a plan, not to confront the investigator directly, but to feed him a stream of utterly confusing, entirely useless, and increasingly bizarre information. Phase 1, the decoy schedule. We printed a fake calendar and accidentally left it in my open mailbox. It included things like the 2 p.m. secret HOA hacking seminar, bring snacks. 4 p.m. squirrel diplomacy meeting. 6 p.m., lawn laser weapon testing. Then came Phase 2, visual confusion. Every day, we altered something small on my property. Monday, I wore a bathrobe and greeted invisible guests at the front door. Tuesday, Sarah walked past the PI's car holding a Down with Ficus Trees protest sign. Wednesday, Jim stood in his yard playing the bagpipes, which he does not know how to play. By Friday, the guy looked stressed, like he was questioning all his life choices. But Karen wasn't done. At the next HOA meeting, she dropped the real bomb, a motion to officially declare me personally, as a community disruptor. Some kind of HOA blacklist designation that had never once appeared in any bylaw, anywhere. Her justification? Patterns of nonconformity. I stood up. Is that what we're calling neighborhood spirit now? She tried to brush it off. We have evidence. Oh? From your totally not fake real estate consultant? Her jaw locked. I looked around the room, at my neighbors, now friends, now fellow rebels, and I knew in that moment Karen had overplayed her hand. This wasn't a community anymore. It was a movement, and she was losing it. By now you might think we'd be tired. You might think the endless fines, secret surveillance, fake motions, and patterns of nonconformity would have worn us down. Nope, it made us dangerous, because something had shifted, not just in me, but in all of us. We weren't just defending a few gnomes and a busted mailbox anymore. We were defending the right to not live under the iron fist of a woman who thought she was a cross between Martha Stewart and a warlord. So we decided, if Karen wanted a symbol of our so-called disruption, we were going to give her one. A big one. Enter Greg's Revenge. We planned it meticulously. Code names, timelines, diversion tactics. It felt less like a prank and more like a military operation, minus the budget and basic dignity. The idea was simple. Build the biggest, most impossible to ignore lawn installation the HOA had ever seen. Something so absurd, so undeniably whimsical, it would short-circuit Karen's brain on site. We got to work. Mark had access to plywood. Sarah knew a guy who owned a 3D printer. Jim had questionable welding skills. Lisa handled paint. Turns out she's a former art teacher with a dark sense of humor once properly motivated. For 2 days, under the cover of darkness and a strategically borrowed pop-up tent, we built it. A 12-foot-tall gnome, full beard, giant red hat, one hand holding a rake, the other flipping a peace sign. We named him General Greg. Installation day was a masterpiece of timing. At exactly 5 a.m., when the world was still fogged with sleep and HOA inspectors were safely drooling into their pillows, we assembled General Greg on my lawn. He stood there glorious, backlit by the rising sun, looking less like a garden decoration and more like the patron saint of petty rebellion. By 7 a.m., the first dog walker spotted him. By 8 o'clock, pictures were all over the neighborhood Facebook group. By 9 a.m., Karen herself pulled up in her beige SUV, slammed the door hard enough to set off her own car alarm, and marched toward my property like she was storming a castle. She stood there, head tilted back, squinting up at General Greg, and for a full 10 seconds, 10 golden, life-affirming seconds, she said nothing. Then she screamed. I mean, a full-throated, hands-in-the-air, losing her soul scream. Neighbors peeked through windows. A jogger stopped mid-stride. Somewhere, a car alarm went off in solidarity. Karen turned to me, sputtering. This is harassment. I sipped my coffee, perfectly calm. It's art. Violation, vandalism, anarchy. I shrugged. Page 14 of the HOA guidelines. Seasonal or celebratory displays permitted for limited durations. Greg's birthday is today. Sarah chimed in from across the street. Happy birthday, Greg. A small cheer went up. Karen's face went purple. General Greg just smiled, forever peaceful, forever free. The war wasn't over yet. But that morning, standing there under the blazing judgment of a 12-foot gnome, we knew. The battle was ours to lose. Karen was many things, relentless, obsessive, allergic to joy, but she wasn't stupid. When General Greg appeared, she didn't just rage and stomp her designer flats into the dirt. No, she started plotting. She called an emergency board session, and that's when she made her fatal mistake. See, Karen was used to working in the shadows, fake notices, secret votes, surveillance sedans. But an emergency board session? That was public record, mandatory attendance notices, open minutes, witnesses. She couldn't hide anymore. The session was held that Friday evening. Mark, Sarah, Lisa, Jim, we all showed up early, front row, popcorn energy radiating off us like microwaves. Karen strutted in, wearing a lavender power suit that looked one emotional breakdown away from tearing at the seams. She took the mic with a grimace. "We are here to discuss an egregious breach of decorum," she started, voice trembling with manufactured righteousness. "The installation of unauthorized, disruptive, and frankly dangerous lawn statuary." "Objection," I called out. Karen froze. "This isn't a courtroom." "No, but you skipped the open comment period," I said. "Section 3A of HOA governance. Residents are allowed commentary before disciplinary motions." Sarah held up the bylaws, tabbed and highlighted. Karen's lip twitched. Reluctantly, she called for comments. And that's when it happened. Mark stood up first. "I move that we open a formal audit of HOA actions taken without community approval over the past 12 months. Lisa seconded it. Jim thirded it. The room erupted. Polite, furious democracy in action. Neighbors started speaking up about the secret fines, the fake ordinances, the harassment. Someone even mentioned the private investigator. Karen went pale. The board members, the ones she hadn't fully terrorized yet, shifted in their seats, glancing nervously between each other. And then Stephanie, the newest board secretary, spoke. "I reviewed the records," she said calmly. "Karen authorized $6,400 in expenditures last quarter without board consent, including surveillance services." Murmurs, gasps. Karen opened her mouth to spin something, some frantic lie about security assessments or community resilience, but it was too late. The motion passed unanimously. Full audit, immediate suspension pending review. Karen was escorted out of the meeting by 2 other board members clutching her clipboard like a lifeline she forgot how to use. No screaming, no tantrums, just silence. Beautiful, gnome-blessed silence. General Gregg stood proud in my yard that night, illuminated by soft garden lights, as if saluting the fall of a tyrant. The war was over. And we had won. The days after Karen's fall felt surreal. No more warning letters, no more random inspections, no more beige sedans idling at the end of the street like confused FBI agents. The neighborhood just exhaled. People started putting out decorations again. Little things, a sunflower flag here, a cute ceramic frog there. Someone even had the audacity to plant a flamingo right on their front lawn. I stopped by and left a cupcake on their porch. The board meetings became actual meetings, boring, functional, sometimes even cheerful. Stephanie took over temporarily and promised reforms, transparency, fairness, an end to surveillance culture. She even suggested we start a community garden. Jim volunteered to manage it. Lisa offered to run bake sales. Mark said he'd build the raised beds if someone provided beer. It was the closest thing to actual neighborly spirit I'd seen since moving in. And me? I left General Gregg standing tall, right where he belonged. Every now and then, I caught kids taking selfies with him or neighbors slowing down to smile as they drove by. He'd become a symbol, not just of rebellion, but of community. One afternoon, as I was watering the petunias, Mason, the teenage kid from 2 streets over, walked up. He held out a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "For you," he said, grinning. Inside was a miniature gnome, tiny red hat, tiny rake, tiny peace sign. General Gregg Jr. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the watering can. Mason shrugged. "You started something, you know." I ruffled his hair. "Good, somebody had to." He ran off, and I placed the little guy next to my mailbox, right where the very first Gregg had once stood. And for the first time in a long time, I realized this wasn't just a victory over one petty tyrant. It was a reminder that sometimes, standing your ground, even over something small and silly, can change everything. A few months later, word started floating around. Karen didn't disappear quietly. Apparently, she moved 3 states over into a gated retirement community called Serenity Falls. Spoiler, nothing about it is serene. Sources, namely a very chatty former HOA president's Facebook group, reported that Karen attempted to run for leadership there too. Her campaign platform? Protecting aesthetic harmony from lawn decor anarchy. She lost. Spectacularly. To a man who ran on the slogan, "More gnomes, fewer rules." Last I heard, she filed a formal complaint with the Serenity Falls Activities Committee because someone's mailbox had a sticker that said, "Live Gnome or Die." Meanwhile, General Gregg still stands proudly at the edge of my lawn, weathered, faded, unbeaten, just like us.